Hello, I'm Rob Lear, and I want to welcome you here this morning. I'm going to be the facilitator of our press conference here this morning. Let me just enlighten you a little bit about our schedule and our format. I'm going to have the opportunity here to call on our newsmakers here today to give them an opening statement. After we've heard from everybody, I'm then going to open it up to all the questions that you have. I'd like to be able to leave some time that if there are media organizations that would like to do one-on-one interviews, we'd like to make sure that Ray and Kathy have that opportunity. So again, thank you. 8 days ago on July the 7th, Fargo-based attorney David Chapman here filed in district court for the District of Minnesota a civil rights lawsuit on behalf of his client Ray and Kathy Kvalvogs. The family's painful and last resort response to this tragic accident of 6 summers ago that took the lives of Zachary and Connor. Earlier this week, we learned from Chief Judge John Thunheim that Magistrate Judge Leo Brisbois have been assigned this case. I want to start by calling up Attorney Chapman and ask him to give us an opening statement and what this case represents. David?
Thank you. Our case represents the nightmare that Ray and Kathy have been living since June 23rd of 2015. On that day, they lost their sons in a crash near Dalton, Minnesota. And unfortunately, their efforts to pursue truth and justice in this case have met with nothing but resistance and brick walls everywhere they've turned. Our civil case here does not intend to retry the negligence or the wrongful death in that case. That's for other civil litigation. We focus on what happened in the investigation, what happened in the civil trial, and what happened in the ensuing period after that. Our most egregious allegation is that there's been basically a civil conspiracy going on in this case to deny my clients the ability to have a fair adjudication of their case. And for me, I went to law school to pursue truth and justice. That's why people become lawyers. And I can only say that what I've witnessed in this case, the facts, have appalled me in the way that this was handled. Our claims primarily focus upon what is the keystone in the case, the civil case. And as I say, we're not going to try the negligence case again, but we have to focus on it because it is part of the larger conduct in this case. And our civil complaint alleges that the lead investigator in this case, Sergeant Rod Ishins of the Minnesota Patrol, had extremely close personal relationships with leadership at Park Christian School and with the school itself. That close personal relationship colored his view of this case. And our allegations include that he knew full well about his close personal relationship with now President and former Principal Chris Nellermo, and with Kent Hannestad, who was the president before. Our claim asserts basically that from the moment of this crash, there was an attempt to deflect liability and attention from Park Christian School. The coach of the basketball team provided a narrative to the Highway Patrol that he had gone back to assist his players, which proved not to be true. And witnesses at the scene said he was on his phone the entire time. We learned afterwards that he was on his phone with leadership at the school. The conspiracy and the acts that followed involving Sergeant Ishins, we allege, involved his concealment of a conflict of interest in this case. He's known the defendant Nellermo for approximately 20 years. He and his families, or their families, were friends on Facebook. They're married, their wives have attended social events together, including reunions and other social events, which were also on Facebook. Jerry Nellermo, the wife of the now president of Park Christian School and the principal at that time, has referred to defendant Ishins and his wife with the sentimental tag, "We love you guys." 11 days after the death of Zachary and Connor Kvalvog, the defendant Ishins held a big July 4th party, and he sat in my client's home and failed to tell them that most of the people attending that party were Park Christian School students, families, friends of his. He also failed to tell my clients that although he said that his daughter was getting married shortly after July 4th, that she was marrying a Park Christian graduate. He failed to tell that his new son-in-law was a Park Christian graduate whose sister was married to the president of Park Christian School. He also failed to mention that his daughter, the owner of a photography business in Detroit Lakes, took photographs of weddings and special occasions numerous times for people at Park Christian, including the weddings of Chris Nellermo's child, Hannah Stead's child, and a member of the board of directors, June Nygaard. This went on through the entire civil case. This was a 3-year case, and Sergeant Ishins never mentioned once to anybody that he had any kind of relationship with anybody at the school. Chris Nellermo sat through depositions and trial, never mentioned it once. The trial of this case essentially depended upon Sergeant Ishins and his crash report. He downplayed the issue of speed in this case, which he couldn't get a straight answer from anybody at the accident scene. His own report says that the lead car driven by the defendant Kerr, a coach at the school, said they were going 73 miles an hour. His wife said 70. Coach Lee said 75 to 80. The actual black box in the car, the airbag monitoring system, showed 80 to 85 miles an hour, or 80 to 84. Speed is a factor in crashes. The Minnesota State Patrol says it's a factor, and yet the report did not. And Sergeant Ishins evaded every question about speed being a factor in this case, stating no more than it was over the speed limit. In the end, this case rested on his report, and it was brought to the attention of the jury that they should rely upon him as the one with no dog in the fight. Little did my clients know exactly what his interests were at that time. And that is what this civil complaint focuses upon: the conduct of Sergeant Ishins, the conduct of the school, the conduct of the leadership, and the coaches. And that conduct denied my clients their ability to get a fair trial here. For my clients, this has been an uphill fight continuously since the beginning. They even brought this to the attention of the Highway Patrol. It went all the way to the top to Colonel Matt Langer, who said he wouldn't change the report even though he acknowledged in the office of Senator Kent Eakin that there were mistakes in it. And he wouldn't change it because it would give a black eye to the patrol. Not because it was right, but because it would harm the patrol. And it would set a precedent for other investigations involving Sergeant Ishins. This is a case for me that, I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up. It's really quite something if you read the facts in the complaint. And everything that I've said today is in that complaint. And everything is backed up. And we intend to be here until truth and justice is secured. And at this point, you know, I would say that one disappointing thing for me is seeing the reaction on social media. People don't understand the facts in this, and yet they're drawing conclusions before those facts are out. And I can only ask the public to reserve your opinions and wait until this is adjudicated, until the court has the proper opportunity to consider the evidence in this case. That concludes my comments, and I'll turn it back to Rob.
And many of the conflicts that David is talking about, the deception, this poster board just has two of the many examples of some of the social media exchanges between the families, and we'll have a chance to talk more about that, but just know that that's what these boards represent. I'd like to now call up Ray and Kathy just to give them a chance to kind of set the tone here today and talk about the emotions of getting to this point and just how you're all feeling.
Hello? Let me say hello. The worst nightmare that any parent could ever have is to lose a child. But how about all of them? There's nothing that will ever compare to the pain. I wasn't sure when this happened how Ray and I would ever survive without our children. But before I could even process what was happening in our lives, we were hit with the threat of lawsuits. We were unaware that the school, immediately after the accident, started sending out phone calls and emails stating that this was not a school event, because that was news to us. We were rather shocked because we knew it was a school event. A few months after our boys passed away, an acquaintance had said to us, "I think you guys need to get an attorney. You need to fight this." I really thought, though, that the school and the victim that had threatened to sue us, I thought that they would realize that this was a school trip, that they were Christian people. My husband said, we really do need to get an attorney. You know, we're really in a bad spot. People are talking about us getting sued now. We had heard from people that they were working together, that they were building a case so strong, they were going to take us off our pedestal. And we have witnesses that have come forward, and we can prove it. We actually have audio tape of it being said. I made my husband, though, I made him wait 1 year and a day after the date of my boy's accident. I waited for them to come to us and apologize. It never happened, and it still hasn't happened. We have not heard from them. I realize the stress and pain that lawsuits entail. I know that the people that we have served are suffering. I know they are hurting, but it is nothing compared to what they have done to us for 6 years. They have lied and they have conspired, and what they have done is shocking, it is mouth-dropping, and it is horrific. And yet they will be in church on Sunday with their arms in the air. They have lied and they have conspired with a vendetta to take us down, and we have it on tape. And while they did all these horrible things, they sat back and snickered. There was one occasion we went to a deposition, and keep in mind we had been through probably 20 depositions prior to this. One of the attorneys thought it would be funny to hire two armed security guards to sit next to us in the deposition because, see, we were such vicious people. That is what we have put up with for 6 years. On top of the hell of losing our children, I guess that is why we're taking action. This conspiracy has got to stop. No family should ever go through what we have been through.
Here who I know, who I've come and who have been friends here and back there. I know all the faces, and I want to thank you guys and gals for coming. When I saw, and I got to keep it together, when I saw Hunter Pinky roll in, he was my son's best friend, Jacob. And Zach's not here. And they know the truth. The people on the other side, and I'll get myself together, my wife has said it right. They're pure evil. This is ridiculous. This whole thing started with the school setting up an event I wanted no part of. Has Park Christian School, Sergeant Ishins, ever made that comment that on May 15th? Again, everything I say here, members of the press, as my wife has articulated, I can document it, or we have it on tape. It's not made up. How about the things Park Christian School and Sergeant Ishins and their cohorts have said about us? They have made up stories. that are so unbelievable that when I say a few of these, I hope you guys are in shock. I mean, the president of Park Christian School, the current president, the then principal, Chris Elmo, said, that I have stolen land from people, from John Leaseth in South Moorhead. That's the stuff he said, along with his buddy, who was the then president, Ken Hannestead. Chris Nelamo, the president yet at Park Christian School, has said that I stopped along Highway 75 and I beat him up. Or how about this one? That I stalked him at the airport? You can't make this stuff up. And he spread these lies and rumors. And that I'm this rich, horrible, greedy person, and that I'm trying to take down Park Christian School. I've said it to a lot of people in here. We loved that school. We poured our heart and soul into that. Our neighbor is Melissa Anson, and she came up and has told us many times. She said, I had never seen such good ambassadors for a school as you two were. It's not about hating the school. It's about the people in leadership. Prior to the Hannestead-Nellermo regime at Park Christian School, there was a gal named Terrain Berg. We'll call her the president or superintendent. Wonderful lady. If she was here today, and she's not, seek her out. Terrain Berg. She lives in South Fargo, and ask her. There was no issues. There was no problems. I've made this statement before, and I know it's the air of political sayings and all this, but maybe this will resonate with people. Just because you dislike the President of the United States, do those people hate the country, no matter who you're for? I don't think so. Just because we're at odds with the leadership at Park Christian School, the current leadership, we don't hate the school. We don't have a vendetta to take the school down. That's not why we're here. We're after what the current moniker out by the President of the United States says is this country is about fairness and justice. Why shouldn't we have that? Everybody knows about the George Floyd case. I think everybody's heard about that, and the police officer named Derek Chauvin. I asked this question. Why is it that Ray and Kathy Kvalvog are supposed to allow the investigation that's done on the death of both our boys to be done by somebody who has close personal ties to Park Christian School? Not just that they ran into a teacher here, a decades-long relationship. So I ask you, would the family of George Floyd allow the investigating officer of their loved one, Mr. Floyd, to be friends with the Chauvin family? I don't think so. No way. And my two boys are gone at a school event. We're going to a basketball tournament they didn't want to go to. On May 15th of that year of 2015, I send a text message to the head basketball coach, Josh Lee, saying, look, I'll pay back the school whatever amount of money they've got into this, whatever you need, if I can get out of this. He called back and insisted that Zachary for sure has to go. I had two boys. I probably had the best guy on the team, and I had probably the middle guy or the low end. He was a seventh grader who just made the basketball team, okay, that year as a seventh grader. So he's worried about his spot. So, of course, you know, he doesn't want to miss out on anything. But there was other circumstances surrounding going that took precedent for my older son, and I said, hey, Coach, he doesn't want to go. He wants to go to another function where there's college coaches and he can be recruited, et cetera, et cetera. And the coach almost blackmailed me saying, hey, I can talk to the college coaches. I can say good or bad things about your son. Well, what are you going to do as a dad? I don't know if any of you folks out here are sports people, but that's a pretty tough position to be in. Once this trip started and they left Park Christian School on what Park Christian School wants to continue to say is a non-school event, a non-school event paid for by the school, using school uniforms. The travel gear that they had was all Park Christian. The tournament was for high school teams only, and in big bold letters, no club teams. Come on, Park Christian, you can't even come clean about that? As my wife has said many times, how would you as parents, when every bit of information you get coming from the school, wherever they go, Park Christian, Fargo South, Davies, Grand Forks Central, when all the information that comes from the athletic director or the head coach, why would you as parents ever think it has nothing to do with the school? Why would you think that? But yet Park Christian stays with that narrative. Not only that narrative that it's not a school event, that the upper people knew nothing about it. I have 2 documents here. You can come up afterwards, you can ask me questions about them, I can give you copies. And I want to just speak about each one, and then we'll open this up to questions. The first one is the 2014-2015 Park Christian High School Handbook. And I'm going to refer to two parts of it. The first one is on page 21. It's called the grievance procedure, and my wife touched on it. And under the grievance policy, it says that there may be times when a parent will have a grievance against a teacher, a staff member, or an administrator, a board member, et cetera, et cetera. In all such situations, Park Christian School will observe the principles outlined in our Lord in Matthew 18:15-17, Galatians 6:1. We ask that you observe these principles, and we agree to do the same. You just heard from my wife. We waited over a year to talk to those people. That guy right there, and I'm glad he showed up, his name is Andy Dahl. He's the assistant football coach, assistant head football coach at Park Christian School, was back then, and he was a strength coach. I asked him, because I could get nowhere, to go to the chairman of the board at the time from Bethel Church, Gary Seifers. Would you please, Mr. Dahl, I begged him, could you see if you could set up a meeting, broker a meeting, just so I can get out my frustrations that there's some things amiss. He went numerous times. He sat out in the lobby of the church. He can come up here if I'm saying something wrong, please do. They wouldn't meet. It's your own policy, Park Christian. Who's worried about money? Who's worried about liability? I'm not worried about money. I can make my own money. I say that to everybody. I'm not worried about getting anybody else's money. They're worried about money. I'm worried about the truth. Because what Park Christian School did when the crash occurred, they blamed my son. What did Rod Ishins do? He blamed my son. And what did Rod Ishins do to enhance that narrative that Park Christian put out there? Not only did Zachary Kvalvog drive erratically, playing Pac-Man, zipping all over the road before he crashed, what did Mr. Ishins say? And gee, Mr. Kvalvog, as he sat in my house a few days after my kids crashed, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, your son was driving erratically, and he got too far to the left, and the rumble strips threw him into the ditch. At that moment, I walked out of my house, and so did my wife, and left Rod Ishins sitting in my house all alone with my cousin, because I knew right there, this is ridiculous. The rumble strips threw you into the ditch? Of course, I didn't know that there was a relationship at all between Ishins and the school then. But that was the antithesis of this. That's what started it. I thought, how crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And what did Rod Ishins do that day as he sat in my house after we did finally come back? He told us he needed to wrap things up really quick because he had a big 4th of July party to go to. Oh, and again, what did he forget to tell us? Most of the attendees are Park Christian people. And then the next thing he wanted to do was go out in my garage and look at a snowmobile collection. And when we were out there, of course, I accommodated. I tried to be a decent human being. He says, yeah, well, yeah, and gosh, I got to tell you, Ray, my daughter's getting married in the middle of July. I'm going to have to take vacation. Take vacation? And his daughter's getting married to a recent Park Christian grad. Just failed to tell us that. And most of the people at the wedding are Park Christian folks. Just failed to mention that fact. And the other thing that he did that day in my house, just a few days after my kids died, Mr. Ishins told us that it was all my son's fault. He just drove off the road on his own because that's what he got from the coaches. That's what the coaches told him. And the rumble strips threw him in the ditch. But he failed to mention that the very next day, Mr. Ishins took a 26-page report from one of the victims who survived by the name of Jimmy Morton. Happened to be a black man. And there's all kinds of racial overtones with these guys too, okay? He said in his official report that I have over here, and I'll get to that in a second, but he sat in my house telling me this narrative that Zach just drove off the road on his own, the rumble strips threw him in the ditch, when he had a completely different version of the accident from a fellow who survived the accident by the name of Jimmy Morton. And he says in his official report, dated June 24th, 2015, he says still in this document, I never took a report from Jimmy Morton that day. I've got it sitting over there. It's a 26-pager. And you know what that young man said, how the accident unfolded? Of course, you haven't heard this from Sergeant Ishins or Park Christian School, that Zachary saved my life. There was no erratic driving. There was no overcorrecting. They were driving, trying to keep up with the coaches who were driving well in excess of 80 miles an hour, and a semi's coming over, and all the boys looked over at the semi, and my son, who always said, because he didn't swear, I never even used to swear until this stuff has happened, and I'll try not to do it today. But they all looked over, and Zachary said, geez, and boom, into the ditch he went. That's what happened. But the breadcrumbs were laid to blame Zachary by the coaches in the school all along. Second part of this document that we have from Park Christian School, their handbook, is the transportation policy, okay? Who Park Christian School, Judge Lawson, who presided over the case, and there's some ties there. We can get that out, and you can ask me questions about that. Under the transportation policy at a school event, I will simply read letter E. No student will drive their own cars from a school to an out-of-town meet or event. Yet the general social media narrative that somehow has blamed us for this is, well, you let them drive. You let them drive. How about this narrative? When you send your kids to a school event and you hit the school campus, they're in charge. They're in control. How about this? They let them drive. It's their policy. They let them drive. I've given this story many times about my kids they love to wear shorts. They followed Mr. Woodside here, okay? That's Ben Woodside if you don't know who he is. That was their protege. That was their friend, okay? That's who they trained with. They loved to wear short pants. But when it came to January, Park Christian School had this policy, you can't wear shorts. Almost every winter, what did Ray Kvalvog get? A call from the school. Well, yeah, Mr. Kvalvog, you got to come and bring long pants for your kids. We got a policy. So let's enforce the policy on that, but not on this. But it's my fault or it's my son's fault. Last thing. This document here. This is what's called the General Orders of the Highway Patrol. The Highway Patrol has an obligation that if you have any potential conflict of interest, that you need to come forward, you need to recuse yourself. I'll read just a couple of those directly from the document I have here, and you can make your own conclusions as to whether or not you think Sergeant Ishins needed to relieve himself of this case. Under letter F, it says, for the public to have faith in the State Patrol, sworn members must avoid conduct that does or could cast doubt upon the impartiality of the individual member of the department. Could? Okay, must avoid conduct. Under letter G, Sworn member shall, unless required by law or policy, refrain from becoming involved in official matters or influencing actions of other peace officers in official matters impacting the member's immediate family, relatives, or persons with whom the member has or has had a significant personal relationship. When you're friends with Mr. Ishins, you do business with Mr. Ishins, and you're related to Mr. Ishins, the other side, I think that should knock you out, that you have a significant personal relationship. Because if by those narratives that isn't a significant personal relationship, I don't know what would constitute one. That's all I have, and I will certainly answer any questions, difficult, hard, easy, and there's nothing you can say that's going to offend me. Thank you.
We can open it up to questions. Please, your name, your outlet, and your question, and we'll try to get to them all.
My name is George. I'm a reporter with KBRR, and you mentioned that both your children went against their will, but you as their parents, you kind of had that decision, but can you elaborate more on that?
Do you want me to?
Okay, can you guys hear me? Or do I need to use this? Hello?
No.
Okay. No, it was a school trip. Keep in mind, if our children didn't attend practices, there would have been retaliation. They were told that if they didn't come to the practices every morning at 6 a.m., they wouldn't get the spots on the team. There was a lot of, before this, a lot of different things that have happened along the way that we knew that we had to toe the line. We had actually, at one point, tried to switch schools, but with the Minnesota High School League rules, my sons would have had to sit on the bench for almost a year at the other school. So there was reasons why we had to do what we had to do. The day of the accident, my son Zachary took his brother Connor in our vehicle to the school, as Ray had told the coach that the school could use the vehicle. When my husband came to the school with another player, that is when he found out that there were two coaches and there was a wife. Tim Kerr was the head football coach. He led the caravan at 84 miles an hour. And Ray went and said, "Can your wife drive?" And Tim refused to let her drive. There was another gentleman who came to drive, but he had forgotten his wallet and he thought he lost it, so he had gone back home. And the coaches had made lunch reservations at the Mall of America at the Rainforest Cafe, so they did not want to wait, so they made Zachary drive, and they had given him a captain's duty sheet, which stated that he, as a captain, is responsible for transportation.
Yeah, and just to echo that, so if you can think of it this way, you end up at the school parking lot. I came with a fella named Jimmy Morton. He didn't have a ride to go to the school. So the instructions were for my two boys to show up at the school. I said, okay, Zachary, you take your brother to the school. We're gonna see what happens, okay? When we get there. I gotta go pick up Jimmy Morton, who was way in West Fargo. Okay, the other point that Park Christian has failed to mention, and this is what bothers me, and I forget your first name, but it's okay, is that the night before my kids were to embark on this trip, Monday night, the 22nd, there was an email exchange, text message exchange between me and one of the other parents. Her name was Cheryl Schwann. Okay? That text message clearly indicates that not only me, but Cheryl Schwann, Tina Rodriguez, other parents were told by the kids, because they had practiced that Monday morning, hey, the coaches are driving. So just show up and we'll see what they got for transportation. That's what we were all told. But that text message between myself and that other parent got thrown out of court on a technicality because I guess my attorney didn't get it in on time. But again, are we here, Park Christian, to see what we can get away with? Or are we here to see what the truth is? So the truth of the matter is, all of us as parents thought the coaches were driving some sort of vehicles to the tournament. But when we got there, There was no vans or buses. The coach came in a car that was out of oil. I asked him if he simply wanted, when I found out there's no vans, there's no buses, and his car's a wreck, I even kidded him about it. He was driving junk. I requested he drive my son's vehicle. He wouldn't do it because he said, I've got an obligation with my wife. I'm going to pick her up in the cities, it's yada, 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 yada. He wouldn't drive. He wouldn't have any players in his vehicle. I did go to the Kerr family, the other coach, and his wife. She wouldn't drive. She wanted to do a Bible study. That guy I went to, and I'm not trying to pick on him, be mean because he's here, but I asked him to drive. And it's not his fault that he didn't. He had his football guys in, and he wouldn't drive. So I come to my kids and I said, this ain't gonna go, guys. I have the best player on the team, and I have the middle of the road guy player, okay? But he's good. He's good. So, and I didn't know the mandate that my son had, that he's supposed to arrange for transportation. So I'm the dad. Do you think I'm going to say, hey, guys, as they're saying, as my son's there saying, look, you know what the coach said? He's going to talk to the college coaches. My youngest son, Dad, I just made the team. We got to go. And Zachary, in his mind, he's in charge of transportation. So I ask any of you folks, if you've got any knowledge of sports, whether it's the high school level, the college level, or the pros, who in the world, except for Park Christian School, puts the kids in charge of transportation? I know of none. So that's the dilemma. And they go.
April Baumgarten with the Forum. If this case is successful through federal court, is there a chance that the one in Clay County could be reopened or retried?
They're totally separate cases. This one focuses on the conduct during the trial and after, and during the investigation. The civil trial in Clay County is a subject of an appeal right now, and that's totally separate.
Yes, Eric Johnson, Egg Century Radio Network. Have you guys ever gotten any clarification from the state high school league on the rules, what this was? Because there seems to be, the Park Christian School seems to be putting out the message that this was just totally a fun tournament, had nothing to do with them, but on the other side, it certainly looked like Park Christian was a major part of sending the kids to this tournament. I'll ask the question, who even wrote the check to get the entry fee into the tournament?
Park Christian is the one who wrote the check for the tournament. They claimed it was, right away, they claimed it wasn't a school event because it wasn't on the school calendars or in the school monthly newsletter. So they provided us all of the school calendars and the school newsletters. However, after they were deposed and sworn by oath, I ended up finding the 4 school calendars and the 1 monthly newsletter that they hadn't included, which of course had this trip on it. So that was their defense initially. They also stated that the school uniforms that the boys were supposed to wear on that tournament were paid for and owned by the students themselves. We brought in parents at depositions who had no idea what they were talking about. No one has ever owned their own school uniform. So now they're claiming that these school uniforms were retired uniforms. So we had school uniforms. They made these kids go back into the school and get the Park Christian School balls. The check was written out by Park Christian School. It was for high school teams only. They made the hotel reservations. Like I said, we had said if they needed our truck, they could use it, but it was a Park Christian School event, and they were responsible for everything after that.
I think the only thing that I'll add to that, Eric, is that again, instead of just being honest, a modicum of decency. 2 boys are dead, and just come clean. It's all cover up. Even in that case, can't you just have 1 degree of honesty and accountability and responsibility? You shovel it all onto us, the parents, or my son? So is that the way it is, Park Christian School? Is that the way it is? And yeah, I'll pick on Judge Lawson, who somehow can't get the handbooks correct between the high school league and ours, and who threw our transportation policy out that, hey, we can't judge this case on letting Zachary drive or not drive because the handbook that we presented, she says, Judge Lawson, was the incorrect here, and she's wrong. She's wrong.
I don't think we answered the question with the Minnesota High School League. I also want to say that they did make my son Connor, prior to getting in the vehicle, go put on a Park Christian School polo shirt. That's what the kids were to travel in. That was part of their handbook. And that's what my children died in, is the Park Christian School logo polo shirts, but yet it's not a school event, I guess, to them. The jury did deem it to be a Park Christian School event. The Minnesota High School League is, again, doesn't really want to do too much. Made the comment that, hey, lots of schools are cheating, so, you know, we don't want to get too involved, and it's very disappointing that they haven't really actually done something about this. This is very sad that these organizations are in place and they're really not doing anything.
So it's pretty evident that there are a lot of relationships that Sergeant X shares with Park Christian and leadership. I think what's going to come up at court is what evidence is there that he actually had a motive, or that there is a smoking gun, that he did this because of that relationship.
Well, the complaint takes a very careful approach to the issue of conspiracy, and that approach is that the overt acts taken by the sergeant are evidence. And we cited to a number of events involving the conflict of interest, the relationship. There was during this, not even during this case actually, my clients learned well after the verdict was rendered that Sergeant Ishins was talking to the principal of Park Christian School about some mysterious issue of evidence that we still don't know what it is. There was a Snapchat message between the now president, who was the principal then, Chris Nellermo, and Rod Ishins, in which they were discussing evidence, and Sergeant Ishins said it was a good question, I was thinking about this, you should talk to your lawyer about it. And they referred to each other on a first name basis, thanks Rod. And that just stood out to me because there was a deposition in this case for Rod Ishins in which he was told to bring every item of communications with him. He never disclosed the Snapchat message. He has to this day never disclosed exactly what they were discussing. Mr. Nellermo has never disclosed it to my clients in the civil case, and has never to this day discussed exactly what they're talking about. And there are numerous situations in this case that finally made me take this. I weigh claims carefully before I write a complaint. And in this case, I wanted to write it so that we were very clear in terms of what we thought were the overt acts that led to the evidence of a conspiracy.
I also want to state that all of the leaders and people involved from Park Christian School, as well as Sergeant Rod Ishins, were supposed to bring all of their communications to depositions. Every single one of them, including Sergeant Ishins, stated that they miraculously had their phones had deleted everything. So there weren't any communications from anyone. Not from the coaches, not from the presidents, not from the athletic director, and not even from Rod Ishins, who it's his duty to protect evidence. But he had nothing to provide. He said that he has issues with his phone. Tim Kerr said that he had issues with his phone. Ray had asked him if he could see some text messages. What did Josh say after the accident? Because we knew the coach's story wasn't adding up. And Tim said that his phone deleted everything as well. However, a couple years later, he came into his deposition with only messages from Ray and him, and he had them all color-coded. So obviously, his phone didn't delete all the messages. So that was one thing. And then also, we do have some handouts for you. We do have the victim, one of the victims who sued us right away, and I just want to say it wasn't the victim who had nothing. There is a victim who is of color, and he has no money, but he has evidently integrity that other people don't. But the victim that did try to sue us and is suing us right now, we just got the lawsuit a couple weeks ago. We do have some information on him that I'd like you to see, and keep in mind that this victim and the school worked together to really build a case against us. There was one instance where he was asked to do a program, a skit at the spring banquet. He jumped up and touched his toes just a few months after the accident. And the school did post that that video on their website for everyone to see who didn't make it to the banquet. However, they did clip out the part of him jumping up and touching his toes because obviously they wanted to make sure he could sue us. So those are the types of things that we've dealt with. And when you see the audio and the video that we have, you will be shocked at what these people have tried to do to us.
Any other questions? Yes.
Anna Johnson, Valley News Live. You had mentioned a number of people had been deposed. It sounds like some of the information they gave was conflicting. So at the resolution of this case, will you be seeking any action for people who may have been involved in conspiracy to omit evidence or people that may have perjured themselves?
Perjury is something that's not within our purview of our case here, and it's not something that we can pursue. And in terms of what people say within depositions and that, there's a certain amount of litigation liability or litigation immunity that people are involved in. That's what we focused on the federal claim here in terms of what evidence we had, and of course we kind of laid that out step by step in the complaint. That's the extent of the claim that we're going to be making at this point.
Let me also follow up, and I'm no lawyer, but I've been through, countless depositions now. And he can jump in and say if I'm wrong. But one thing I've learned, and that's what these people have done, and I'll name the names, from Ken Hannisted to Chris Snellermo to Rochelle Richardson, right down the line. And if you ever want to come and see me, and I will show you their depositions, I've got them all sitting in my office in nice, tidy little brown envelopes. I might have some markings on them. You can lie and lie and lie. And in this case, us, as the people on the other side, there's not one thing you can do about it. All you can do is impeach him, but you can't do one thing about it. And the examples are numerous of, again, what they have done to try to blame us. Just to give you an example, the athletic director there was Rochelle Richardson. One of the things I always wanted to do, he knows it, he probably knows it, he probably knows it. I wanted to be a coach over at the school. I was told I wasn't a good enough Christian. I lack Christian discipleshipness. But my kids have been going there since kindergarten. I see she showed up. That's the former superintendent of the president's school right there, Tareen Berg. You can ask her afterwards, am I that horrible of a person? Because I sure wrote a lot of checks, and I had a lot of kids under Ray and Kathy's wing that went to that school. They never faltered once on accepting any of that money or any of the time and energy and efforts we put in, ever. But the athletic director at the school, at the very beginning of this, and under Ken Henniston and Chris Nellermo's watch, she tried to say that I was hired as the C-team boys basketball coach. So I am just as liable, if there was liability, on the coaches as anybody else. I've never been the C-team basketball coach. They just make it up. As my cousin would say, they make things up and lie when they don't even have to. Or another one. The hatred that they had for us, my son, a month before he died, I've got it in my paperwork here. A month before he died, you have to do what's called a statement of faith or intent for the upcoming year. And you know what he wrote in that? So that's going through my child's head. And I think most of you might have kids, so maybe this will resonate. But this is going through. You know what he had to write on there? And he was honest. He said, I hope in the next year for forgiveness from the upper brass at Park to my parents, because that's how they treated us. They treated us like dogs. They continue to treat us like dogs. Yeah, so that's what's going through. So that's what my son wanted for the upcoming year. Nice people. And going back to the questions, the retribution, if you didn't follow along and toe the line, your kids were off the team, they were demoted, they're not the captain. One of the gentlemen in the back asked, well, gee, what if you did, why did you, back to the driving thing. Well, if you didn't go along, like my wife said in the summer practices, I wish Coach Inniger was here, okay? At these, what they also want to describe now as open gyms, they've lied about that there weren't practices. Call Coach Inniger. I'll give you some names and numbers. He'll tell you. He started these 6 a.m. practices. If you didn't go to practice, okay, how would you get to be the captain? They picked the captains in the summertime. They put in their offenses and defenses. They picked out the top 7 players. You had to go to these things. It was mandated. or there's retribution to your kids. If you love your kids, as we did, and I think most people do that got kids, you love them. You want the best for them.
Time for two more.
You mentioned George Floyd's case, and as you may know, it's very hard to have someone who is a law enforcement officer arrested. It's even harder to sue, as we know there is qualified immunity, or that some officers claim that. Do you foresee that coming into play? And also, does the George Floyd ruling give you some hope that you could be successful in this case?
Qualified immunity is a little bit different than this, and I think the overt acts that we put in our complaint show that he had no probable belief that this was the reality of what happened in that crash. But I don't expect that that's going to be the major issue here. Qualified immunity you usually see in arrest situations. Do they have the right to arrest somebody? Well, do they have probable cause? That's a pretty low bar, but this is a little different.
Last question?
So we had clarified who the chaperones were specifically on this trip, and then after the accident occurred, what did they do?
Again, the trip was led by two Park Christian coaches, Josh Lee, who was driving the middle vehicle with no athletes in his car. The lead vehicle in the caravan, of this three-car caravan, is the head football coach, Tim Kerr, and then his wife. They were the people, they were the supervisors, they were the people in charge. But they were on the payroll, they were truly the coaches. And what was it?
Then after the accident occurred, what did they do? What was their role immediately after the accident?
Well, what's interesting, that's a good question. I mean, and I think my wife said that in her opening statement, once the accident occurred, Josh Lee, who claimed, and it's still not changed in this official Highway Patrol report, it's claimed that Josh Lee springs into action and he's ping-ponging around helping victims, and he slams on his brakes and runs back. That's proven to be totally false. He completely lied about it. He helped nobody. Yet it's still contained in this document. It's not true.
And Tim Kerr was the head vehicle. He was called immediately. He knew something had happened because he saw Josh Lee pull over. He was called immediately by Josh and Josh told him to call 911. He called 911 and he acted like he didn't know who was in the accident. Like there were just some people in a truck, I think. And he drove 9 miles and passed 6 emergency exits before he finally turned around. Didn't get back to the accident scene for about 30 minutes. So that's kind of the stuff that we dealt with. My child died along the side of the road with a random passerby rather than the coach.
And the follow-up that, Mr. Johnson, is what's interesting, and let's get the names right. It's in their depositions, under oath, from the top people at Park Christian School: Kent Hannestead, Chris Nellermo, Rochelle Richardson. So immediately after the accident, the head coach is calling back to the school. That's Josh Lee. And he's talking to those 3 people. Okay? But in their depositions, when we wanted to see what story, what information about the accident, how things occurred, from the guy who says he saw it all, which turns out to be he's lied again, because when it came to his deposition, he said he never saw anything. But at the moment in time when he calls back to the school, numerous times in talking to those 3 head officials, when we asked those 3 officials, well, what did Josh Lee say to you folks, Mr. Hannestead, Mr. Nellermo, and Miss Richardson? What happened? You know what the answer was? All 3 of them, they said, well, we never asked. So think about that. 2 dead, 2 injured. The head coach on this so-called non-school trip, that's because that's what they're claiming, calls the school and says, hey, I got to tell you guys, I got to tell you, Mr. Hannestead and Mr. Nolan, Mr. Richard, yeah, Zachary and Connor Kvalvog have gone, and the 2 other boys, Mr. Schwann and Mr. Morton, they're hurt. Did they just go, okay, well, that's good. Make sure you bring the uniforms back and quit stealing from us because this wasn't a school event? No. I mean, any normal person, they're lying, would say, what happened? If Mr. Lear walks out of here today and drops over and I get a call from his wife, and I have to call her, and I say, hey, Rob's not going to be home for a while. There was a situation here at the hotel. She's just going to say, okay, good, that's good, Miss Call. No, she'll say, what happened? It's all covering constantly.
And my recollection of that is that there were 8 phone calls in all.
I don't have the specific number, and I always hate to give specific numbers because what Park Christian likes to do to you is if you say one iota of thing that you maybe misspoke. For instance, I couldn't remember exactly how many titled vehicles I have. Oh, he's a liar. He's a terrible human being. That's the narrative that they preach.
There was a series of calls.
That is correct. Numerous phone calls.
Ray and Kathy